Good morning and welcome. I'm Ray Hadley. Great to have your company on 2GB stations on the Macquarie Regional, Southern Cross and Capital Radio networks.
Ray Hadley is one of the most powerful voices in the country.
He's an enigma, and I'll be honest, there are things that appealed to me about Ray Hadley early on.
I've got to go around and do some TV, so excuse me.
As a broadcaster, he's a very hard-working broadcaster.
Hey, Ray.
With a direct line to power.
It's always a good day to be with you. Thanks, mate. Thank you so much.
He's well known for taunting.
I'm not going to use my faith as a stunt, mate, for the program, OK?
And name-calling the powerful on air.
Geez, you're a wanker, Scott. A complete and utter wanker.
Away from politics, he's radio's voice of rugby league.
Great ball to Kennedy from Mortimer. He's beside the post.
But rumours of his off-air behaviour have long been hinted at, even from his most ardent supporters.
When he gets angry on air or off air, it's pretty scary. It scares politicians, let alone staff members.
Now, former colleagues are coming forward. They say Ray Hadley is a workplace bully.
What you hear on the radio is a very shouty, opinionated man. There's no doubt he's aggressive on air, but off air he is really a ferocious human being.
No, just... that was suggested. No, hang on. Whoa. Listen.
Ray Hadley's on-air style is itself a kind of bullying. He's not peddling entertainment information or news, he's demonstrating power.
Goodbye, Lee. You're soon to forget, Lee, it's the Ray Hadley morning program.
The fact that people like Ray Hadley can bring in so much revenue gives them a level of untouchableness. It's almost like nothing can be done about them.
It's Friday night at Homebush Stadium. ABC Grandstand's Andrew Moore, a 30-year radio veteran, is calling tonight's footy.
10 to 12,000 here tonight for the unbeaten Parramatta Eels, taking on the premiers, the Sydney Roosters.
I love doing it every week. I'd lost that love. I've regained it, thankfully, over the last 4 and a bit years, but to me, it's exciting.
Sydney Roosters 8, Parramatta 6. It's 1 try apiece.
Crowds roaring. It's a thrill to me, even now.
Andrew Moore has known Ray Hadley longer than most. Now they're on rival stations, but the pair worked together for decades.
He's kicked the goal. Mitchell Moses converts from out wide.
He's been a very successful broadcaster. As a human being, I think he's a bully. I think he thrives on intimidation, has done ever since I've known him as a kid.
They're cheering the Roosters players and it tries awarded.
Well, I owe my start in the game to him. This is an easy thing to talk about because I started in radio really because of him.
What was your first meeting like with Ray Hadley?
My first meeting was my first day of work experience in 1984. I was in year 10, so I would have been 15. You ripped the machine out, threw it against the wall, smashed into a million pieces. That stayed with me for 30-odd years, and that was an extreme case that I saw replicated.
Andrew Moore says the bullying and intimidation went on for a number of years and was in part impacting his mental health.
Yelling and screaming is definitely one. Intimidation is a big one.
Did he ever intimidate you?
Yeah, he did. Not as often as I saw him with others, and I worked with him probably 20-odd years of my career. But where it got me was the last year there, isolation. It was a kit in his bag that he used with me.
He says his wife finally pointed out the contribution his workplace had on his mental state.
She was saying, no, that's you. You go to bed, you don't talk. So it makes you feel weak. So I eventually went to a psychologist, got told I had anxiety, and I hated going to work. And I hate feeling so weak.
How many years after you working with Ray did this stuff sort of raise its head?
Well, I think even now, 4.5 years later, it still exists. Just from time to time when I feel stressed. It's just the effect on your wife and your kids. And I think a lot of people are going through it.
He says one complaint to management ended up in Hadley's hands and on air.
All of a sudden I would hear references to discussions I've had with management, what I thought were private emails being referred to on air by Ray, laughing about them.
Andrew Moore blames 2GB management for not acting.
He brings in a lot of revenue, they pay him a lot of money, and they're going to protect that at all costs. The impact is ongoing for people, and I think if they can be emboldened by the fact that it can happen to someone who's been around as long as I have, it might give them a bit more courage to face what they had.
You work in a competitive industry. How do you respond to the idea that you're just trying to tear down a competitor and maybe even seek damages?
My main thing of talking out, and it wasn't something I agreed to easily, because I just think that there are so many people out there who have been victimised by bullying from him in one form or another.
It's not just radio rivals who say they've been bullied by Ray Hadley.
News Update is there, News Update is ready. Wasn't into TV, I just love radio for some reason. It was just in my blood from a very early stage. Yeah, you got 2 minutes to go, 2 minutes to go.
Nobody worked more closely with Hadley than Chris Bowen, his personal panel operator for 16 years. So close, in fact, that Ray Hadley was the master of ceremonies at his wedding.
You think you're in the good books with Ray one moment, and then subsequently you're not. So it was this to and fro behaviour, a love and hate, call it if you want to call it that, a love and hate relationship.
Many former and current 2GB employees we've spoken to say that you and Ray Hadley were like thick as thieves, very close. And in fact, Ray Hadley even emceed your wedding. Why did you allow that to happen if you say the abuse and the harassment and bullying was so bad?
It's a very good question. And to be honest, I, in a way, have been complicit in some of his behaviour simply because I was fearful of him, and you had to do what Ray said.
Live broadcasting situations are pressurised and often robust conversations take place.
Yeah.
Is this behaviour that you're alleging just part of a normal broadcasting situation?
There's no time for courtesies, but there's also no time to be called a C, to be called an F-head, an F-wit, to be personally attacked.
But Chris eventually took issue with one daily and hated task.
At the conclusion of the program, he would get up, I would follow him with the chair down the corridor along with his headphones, and I would wheel that past the newsroom with everyone, you know, glaring at me and going, "You poor guy, you were like a lackey." It was called the Walk of Shame.
Bowen wrote to Hadley in June 2010 saying the task was degrading. Hadley shot back, "Do it or find another job." Bowen wrote to the then program director, "I don't need the stress of my job being in jeopardy." Chris, you've had your own personal problems, you've suffered loss of family members, and you posted your complaints about Ray Hadley's behaviour whilst you were in a clinic receiving treatment for alcoholism.
Correct.
Is it the case that you're now blaming your former employer for problems that you've been experiencing in your own life?
No, they're two separate things. I mean, you know, I am suffering severe anxiety. I admitted myself to a clinic voluntarily. I do have a problem with alcohol. I was self-medicating.
Hadley's verbal abuse has been caught on tape before, such as this instance directed at an employee during the Athens Olympics.
He's a f***ing idiot, and I'll be telling John Brennan that. He's lost my support, that bloke. He's lost it all together. Right, well, he'll f***ing lose me, and when I find him, I'll pull his f***ing ears. He's a f***ing idiot. He's a f***ing dick.
Hadley's alleged workplace bullying has extended to those well outside his show's team.
Ray Hadley had nothing to do with my employment there. He's an on-air presenter. I was working for the newsroom. It was a good environment to start with.
Now a documentary maker, Jesse Perez wrote a satirical article while working for 2GB in 2009 that Hadley deemed inappropriate.
He didn't really understand the humour, and I was called in to his studio at 12:01. That situation felt like I was being fed to the lions. It was ferocious amount of rage that was directed at me. I went downstairs and nearly vomited from like a panic. It was like my guts fell out of my body because I've never been experienced to anything of that ferocity in my professional life.
Jesse Perez claims he raised the behaviour with a manager in January 2009, but the response was lukewarm.
He said to me, look, it's really important that we know this stuff, that you communicate this incident to us because we need to know this. But nothing was done about it.
Hadley has denied any knowledge of Jesse Perez.
I must admit, one fella making accusations against me today, I just have no recollection of.
On air, towards Chris Bowen, Ray Hadley expressed regret.
I'm sorry for any hurt I've caused him. I'd like to think as part of his recovery, we could catch up into the future and talk about all the good times we had, because there's a lot of them over that 15-year period.
Hadley says the bullying allegations are historical.
I took responsibility for my former behaviour, which has been well documented. I gave my word in 2013 to my fellow staff members. The sort of culture I grew up in the radio industry would no longer be the standard I'd abide by. I can only say, again, if people have been offended by my previous behaviour, I can only apologise as I did in 2013, and I again today do it. If you want a pound of flesh, you're getting it.
But as recently as 2013, 2GB paid out another employee after that staff member covertly recorded Ray Hadley's verbal abuse towards him. Last week, management emailed staff saying that these claims were, quote, historical, and that Ray Hadley was being supported. Ray Hadley and 2GB management have not yet accepted our offer for an interview.
The only humane response is to close that industry down.
Ray Hadley was ferocious in hounding politicians into overturning the greyhound racing ban in New South Wales. Imre Salazinski was targeted by Hadley on air because of his role advising the former New South Wales Premier, Mike Baird.
I have a long-standing concern, before any of this arose, about the tendency of the political class, particularly conservative politicians, to regard Hadley as an ally or to give in to Hadley's threats. I think it reflects poorly on them. I think it leads to poor policy, and I also think it reflects a view of the media landscape that's very old-fashioned.
In the studio with me is a former police officer and the Immigration Minister, Peter Dutton.
I think there's a message in this for the Peter Duttons of the world who rock up there every week, feed the beast, think it's going to help them somehow, and now these guys have to step back. They have to step away while these allegations are seriously investigated, because workplace bullying destroys lives and is not on.
In a statement, 2GB said they'd received no formal complaints from Moore, Bowen or Perez. Ray Hadley said he did not recall the incidents raised by Andrew Moore. He did, in fact, recall Jesse Perez, whose article he called inappropriate. He added, "I'd like to make amends with anyone who has been affected by my past behaviour." But I suppose the question is, Chris Bowen's recent Facebook post sparked others to speak up about their experiences. Why didn't you raise it any earlier?
Well, I don't trust management. I never have, because as I've said, Ray's tentacles are everywhere. And I said in my Facebook post, which started all this, raising a complaint against Ray Hadley was about as effective as setting yourself on fire.
There's a huge level of hypocrisy because 2GB is a station that is saying we are the moral arbiters of society. You're doing this wrong, you need to correct yourself. But it's almost like the same level doesn't apply to them.
And he's tackled mid-quarter halfway Roosters territory. Friend dummy half.
Years later, Andrew Moore is still coping with the experience of working with 2GB's Ray Hadley.
He's got to be accountable for it. Definitely a very successful and good broadcaster, but a deeply flawed human being.
That report from Andy Park and producer Penny Timms. You can find full statements from Ray Hadley and 2GB on our website. And if that story's raised issues for you, you can contact Lifeline on 131114 or Beyond Blue on 1300 224636.